The left's anti-Trump and National Guard rhetoric is under the microscope today as one service member is left dead and another is still fighting for his life after being shot in our nation's capital.
I don't think you have an armed militia in the nation's capital.
Sending in militarized federal immigration agents and National Guard troops to terrorize Chicago or any American community in any state is not the American way.
The president is attempting to send the National Guard to send and terrorize cities.
Political commentator Mene Ukwe-Barua joins me now. Mene, thank you so much for joining us. We obviously do not know the motive of this suspect for why he is alleged to have done these things. But do you think that those comments coming from Democrats should be under the microscope today?
I absolutely think so. Over the past few months since President Trump first deployed National Guard troops to Washington, D.C., you've had a lot of Democratic elected officials, like the ones we just heard from, a lot of journalists saying that this is a crackdown on the public, not on crime, but that Trump was sending these troops essentially to assert political control and that it was a sign of authoritarianism. When you actually see the activities that the National Guard was doing in Washington, D.C., it had a lot more to do with assisting local law enforcement in fighting crime. In some cases, they were even just standing patrol in public areas, both dangerous ones and touristy ones, and other activities like that were meant to keep the public safe. And so you did see this rhetoric kind of creating a public narrative that a lot of people unfortunately seem to believe that the National Guard themselves posed a threat instead of aiding public safety.
And on that note, The Atlantic has a piece out right now titled "A Terrible and Avoidable Tragedy in D.C." And the author goes on to say the troops deployed in an effort to reduce crime are untrained in law enforcement. Their days are spent cleaning up trash and walking the streets in uniform. Commanders, in a memo that was included in litigation challenging the high visibility mission in D.C., argued that this could put them in danger. The Justice Department countered that the risk was merely speculative. It wasn't. There are costs to performatively deploying members of the military, one of which is the risk of endangering them. What do you think about that characterization of this entire situation?
Well, it just doesn't make any sense at all, because every single public servant is always a potential target. The idea that President Trump was endangering these National Guard troops by sending them to D.C. to fulfill their public mission just shifts the blame entirely from the attacker onto President Trump and the service members themselves. Whether it's a police officer, a National Guard troop, a soldier, anyone who puts on a uniform and is going out into the public is potentially a target for crime. And the only person to blame for that crime is the person who goes out of their way to attack them.
Yeah, and we have the statistics here. Crime in Washington, D.C. since the National Guard deployment, and it is down across the board. Total crime down 30%, homicides down 60%, robbery down almost 50%. That is the point, and the National Guard troop deployment appears to be working.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it seems like Washington, D.C. had become one of the most dangerous cities in the country. A lot of people point to the fact that crime was already declining before the troops were deployed, and that's true. But if you look at the scope of those declines and the fact that it's across every single category, it's clear that the presence of more law enforcement was pushing that downward. A lot of criminals probably saw uniformed people on the streets and had second thoughts about whether they wanted to attempt to carjack a car or a mugging in a public area because they knew there was a much greater chance that they were going to be apprehended. And so the presence of the National Guard is being increased by President Trump in the wake of this attack. And hopefully we'll see crime continue to decline further.
Yeah, by 500 guardsmen, an additional 500 troops are going to be headed to Washington, D.C. And finally, just want to get your thoughts on this announcement that the president made overnight about a permanent pause in immigration from what the administration is describing as third world countries. There's going to be a lot of discussion on this in the days to come. What do you think?
Well, I think it's a natural gut reaction. People see that this was an Afghan national who actually had worked with the United States who committed this attack. But I frankly think that the answer is more vetting. Make sure that the people who are being admitted into this country are being properly screened as opposed to closing the door permanently. So hopefully the pause is just temporary and we're able to return to a process where we're making sure that the people who are being admitted into this country aren't dangerous or aren't coming in with a vendetta against the United States.
Mene Ukwe-Barua, we thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate your time as always.
Thanks a lot.